But before we go to Israel Palestine, we're going to start in the South at the Rio Grande. And we're going to talk a little bit about the multi-billion-dollar Operation Lone Star, which is my Governor Greg Abbott's star policy, which has just frankly been a robbery of Texas money, but more importantly, it's humanity. And it has only gotten worse as time has gone on. Abbott has been devising new ways to harass, torture, and maim people fleeing desperate circumstances and coming to this country to try and build a new life. But I know people have probably seen them. I know y'all saw them on Majority Report today, Matt. But these recent revelations have really taken it a step further. And we'll get into those in just a second. As we've covered on this program, the mobilization of the Texas National Guard and Operation Lone Star has been a humanitarian disaster from the outset, frankly, costing the lives of countless migrants and even Texas National Guardsmen themselves. And I thought that maybe that might wake some people up and push some people to start demanding better from the state government. But those, ideas have sort of fallen to the wayside as it's only continued to get worse. Last year, literally last July, it was revealed that the Department of Justice was investigating Operation Lone Star under the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And I've covered, and if you can have this plan, Matt, I've covered, it's far from the only scandal among deaths of migrants, death of National Guardsmen, lack of payments to troopers on the border, and a whole host of grift and mysterious payments among the billions spent. This thing has been riddled with scandal, and this is the new operation here. They are accelerating it, literally putting up barbed wire across the Rio Grande, putting in these buoys that have barbed wire attached to them, so that people who are crossing that river might get tangled, maimed, or hurt. I've covered for Jacobin the way that Greg Abbott has been diverting desperately needed federal COVID-19 funds to these border operations, which again have done nothing to make the border safer, have done nothing certainly to help the migrants.
Safer.
And it's just been an incredible grift. And this is not the focus of the story, right? The money is not the focus of this at all. But it's unbelievable the amount of people who have been profiting millions of dollars with absolutely zero vetting, and the only real connection or capability that they seem to have to be providing these equipments to the Texas National Guard or to the state of Texas is that they're major campaign donors to Greg Abbott himself. But this recent crisscrossing of the border with this nasty barbed wire, with these buoys, is having massive human consequences. I just want to say before we get into this, this is not going to stop the movement of people over the Rio Grande. That is a deeply rooted problem at this point. It comes from cash outflows from the global south into the United States. It comes from purposeful U.S. policy to impoverish people all around the world in the goal of sort of cementing American global hegemony, punishing political actors that the United States doesn't like. None of this stuff that Abbott is doing at the border is going to stop people from crossing, but it will make their lives worse. These are not going to stop people from crossing. It will literally maim people for life, and in the worst cases, cost human beings their very lives. Earlier this week, a Texas DPS medic reported on some of the horrors they have witnessed at the border, saying in the email that they sent to the DPS, saying that there needs to be an investigation of policies on the border. I believe we have stepped over a line into the inhumane. We need to operate correctly in the eyes of God. We need to recognize that these are people who are made in the image of God and need to be treated as such. And the allegations that he outlines in this report are horrifying. First outlined by the people at the Houston Chronicle, and then also reported by Texas Tribune and other outlets. This whistleblower reported that on June 25th, when he and other troopers came across a group of about 120 people, including small children and nursing babies who were exhausted, hungry, and tired along a U.S. Side, along a fence on the U.S. side. Quote, "We called the shift officer into command, and we were given orders to push the people back into the water to go to Mexico." Remember that, the Rio Grande is higher than it has been in a little while recently. The places that are safe to cross now that they put barbed wire, they're not safe to cross, right? The places that people are now trying to cross because they put barbed wire across maybe the lower parts of the river, are filled with water. So literally you're talking about pushing hungry, scared, confused children into a Rio Grande where they very likely could drown and die. Direct order from the Texas Department of Public Safety. He then goes on to say, we decided that this was not the correct thing to do, with the very real potential of exhausted people drowning. We made contact with command again and expressed our concerns, and we were given the orders to tell them to go to Mexico. This is reporting from the Texas Tribune. The trooper wrote in the email that 5 days later, a 4-year-old girl who attempted to cross the razor wire was pressed back by Texas Guard soldiers due to the orders given to them. The temperature was well over 100 degrees, and the girl passed out, the email said, adding that she had received medical treatment. Later that evening, Texas troopers found a 19-year-old woman who had become so gashed by this barbed wire in the water that she was having a miscarriage. That body is later found by troopers further down the Rio Grande. The 4-year-old girl passed out in 100-degree heat. A man with significant laceration on his leg suffered when he tried to rescue his child from razor wire placed on a deterrence buoy in the Rio Grande. A 15-year-old boy with a broken leg suffered when he tried to cross a more dangerous part of the river away from the buoys. And a 19-year-old woman trapped in the wire was having a miscarriage. There are more stories like that. I mean, it is so deep and disgusting and awful and inhumane, the things that are happening on our border. Another story on July 1st, Border Patrol reported that a mother and her 2 children were struggling to cross the river. The email said a DPS boat team found the mother and 1 child who later died at the hospital. The body of the second child was never found. I mean, what can you say about something like that? I mean, it is absolutely horrible what these people are doing to struggling and suffering people trying to cross over in this country to find a better life, to find hope. The confusion, the pandemonium, and add to all of that, the entire journey on the way here, being preyed upon by some of the most vicious people, the people who, are working around, human smuggling. Really dangerous folks, incredibly dangerous situations in Mexico and all the other countries that these people are crossing. The DPS director of Texas, Stephen McCraw, said, the smugglers care not if the migrants are injured, but we do, and we must take all necessary measures to mitigate the risk to them, including injuries from trying to cross over the wire, drownings, and dehydration. About this email, McCraw calls for an audit of DPS protocols to determine if more can be done to minimize the risk to migrants. I'll tell you right now what will minimize the risk to migrants is picking up all that fucking barbed wire out of the river. Which is very clearly something that is set up to maim and potentially kill people who are crossing over the border. There is no purpose to this other than to harass and to terrorize people. And in these cases, right, this is not even just something that's symbolic. This is something that is physical, that is already lacerating people, that is already causing deaths, that's always already causing drowning. To sit here and say, oh, the smugglers don't care about the lives of these people, but we do, is absolute bullshit when we're getting reports here that people are being ordered by command of DPS to push children into the water. I mean, are you kidding me with that kind of shit? It is so absurd. It is a bald-faced lie to sit here and say that we care for these folks when you're literally putting up weapons of war, militarizing a beautiful part of the earth. With these things for the sole purpose of drowning migrants with the intention that it's going to curtail migration. It's not. All that is going to happen is more and more people are going to suffer more than they have already in the first place. The things that caused them to come here.
Yeah. And I mean, this is perpetuating the nightmares of society because not only is this utterly horrific to whatever degree you want to say in the immediate, you have all of this. I mean, look, I applaud that guy who sent that email because that is
100%.
heroic. The ultimate effect of this is going to be coarsening all these guys deployed onto this against that. Like most people aren't going to be reflective enough to think, oh, what I was doing was actually bad. We've had this entire like literature of like post-Vietnam syndrome where guys had severe difficulties dealing with things that they were forced to do on the border. And like also, like you mentioned about the contractor shit, this is money going right to capitalists who are going to invest it right back into politicians and messaging and fear, and the same exact situations that lead to people being put in this sort of desperation in the first place. This is a self-licking ice cream cone of like horribleness.
And it's sickening. I mean, the celebrations of it, like a story like this should be met with absolute horror. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Matt Schaefer, former Texas rep, says if in fact this is today, if in fact Governor Abbott is taking a bolder approach to border security by directing DPS troopers to repel illegal crossers. So this is somebody well aware of these stories, right? Well aware of these stories about children being pushed into the Rio Grande, saying this is a good thing. He has my full support. Every Republican legislator should be speaking up as Dems in the media try to shame Abbott into backing down. This isn't somebody say, hey, we should, taking the line, for example, that the DPS director, Crawl, saying, oh, we'll investigate. Oh, we care for these people. No, there's somebody saying that's a good thing that these children are being treated this way. That's a good thing that a young woman with child is having a miscarriage on our southern border because they're lacerated because of barbed wire that our government is putting out there in the water. I mean, the it's a height of inhumanity to be able to talk like that, to be able to abstract other human beings' lives like that is one of the more disgusting things that I've seen. And like, I have like a high tolerance for disgusting things for Republicans at this point. I've been doing this long enough to hear the shit that they say. That is something else.
Yeah,
That is
those are
truly
like
something else.
that's like death squad stuff, and it's been going on for a long time
And
with like.
DeSantis too has said that he thinks they should fire live ammunition at people trying to cross the border.
Right. Well, because where does it stop? I mean, Gus Bova had a good reply to that tweet, which is like, all right, name the boldest strategies you're okay with.
Mm-hmm.
Be explicit. Like, let's actually clarify where we're going to stand on like how much we're going to kill.
So I wanted to, I mean, it's like, it's hard to like even pivot from the, you have to talk about politics. All right. This is politics right here. This is the human consequence of politics, right? Be they defeats of a certain party here, and then the victory of the party in power. This is the end result of politics. This comes from a long line of problems in Texas government, in Texas society, frankly. But remember, I've been trying to write about this and talk about this for a long time. The whole idea that Abbott is able to have this border mobilization is something that the Biden administration should not accept.
Yeah.
No reason they should accept a state governor running parallel border operations to the United States Customs and Border Patrol. It's absurd, right?
Yep.
There's no reason, legal justification for this. The way Abbott has been able to fund this is through a disaster declaration. So even in the state of Texas, what Abbott is doing is overstepping the legislature and without giving people civics lesson on Texas government. Abbott has taken a position, which is the governor of Texas, which constitutionally in this state is supposed to be weak, right? It has some power of influence here and there, but the sole power should be residing in the Texas legislature. Abbott has completely flipped the script by using these disaster declarations, by completely dominating the Republican Party. There's no one in the Republican Party who's willing to stand up to Abbott and say, actually, like, we have these powers, right? They've just allowed this to go into Abbott's under his full control because they like it. They don't mind it. It's not a moral problem for them. But he has completely rewrote the Texas Constitution here. I think it's important to also understand that what he is doing is not just immoral, it's also illegal. The only person who can stop this, as people have pointed out, somebody who I'm very quick to criticize, Beto O'Rourke, has come out and said the only person who can stop that is the president of the United States, and there needs to be federal action on this, because this is happening in all of our names, not just Texans, the entire United States of America. They are allowing Greg Abbott to turn this place into a war zone to torture, maim, harass, and potentially kill human beings coming into this country. Unacceptable in any context. And the federal government absolutely should be getting involved. But I just want to sort of,
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Sorry, just to jump in real quick there. Like this is a test, and the Democrats and Biden need to pass this because the counter like the sort of alternate universe where Trump's still in office. I could very easily imagining them fundraising off of this sort of thing, saying, "Put
Mhm.
us in power to change this."
Well, let's look at a couple of these clips. So let's maybe start on a better one. This is Joaquin Castro, uh, congressman, speaking about these, and I think he speaks very clearly here, and I appreciate this from him.
Yeah.
Greg Abbott posted this on social media. He was showing these buoys that will create a floating barrier in the Rio Grande, the river separating the U.S. from Mexico. The goal, the governor says,
Is
is
it
to
coming through? Is
deter
it
migrant
paused?
crossings.
Uh, I think it's coming through. I'll just note for people, the audio is shifted to the left channel, so if you're not hearing it, that's why. We'll mix it down for the podcast.
You make of this? Is there anything that you can do in Congress, if I suppose if you're against it, that you would want to do to stop this? What was your sense of it when you saw this?
Look, Greg Abbott and Republicans in Texas, and really Republicans like Donald Trump and others, for them, the border and immigrants and brown-skinned immigrants are their number one boogeyman to try to get their base all riled up. And so I want to be clear about this. What Greg Abbott is proposing, or what he intends to put out in that water, are drowning devices. Those things are going to force people to drown. Children, disabled people, mothers, and others. He needs to know, and people who support this need to know, that those things are going to cause people to drown. And that's an inhumanity that I can't support. And so we'll take a look in Congress when we come back early next week about what we can do to try to stop him from doing that.
Man.
That went through.
Yo, yes, yeah.
Okay, I'm
Yep.
sorry. I'm not getting it, but that's okay. No, I mean, I think what he says there is absolutely right. That these are drowning devices. And it's purposeful, and that if this is something that you're supporting, if you are somebody like Matt Schaefer out here, who's, you know, for people who don't know, is well known for being a real freak, and a psychopath. And this is what you're supporting, frankly. And I think it's good to not mince words on these kind of things. Another example is our esteemed Lieutenant Governor, second in command, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, talking about this as well. And, you know, look, you see something like this come out, and you would expect, right? I mean, usually there's a kind of a little wink and a nod, right? Oh, yeah, we take this very seriously, right? This is pretty exceptional the way he pivots here. So he's going to give you a very political answer, and I just figured we'll play the entire clip so you can see him say, oh, yeah, we'll investigate, blah, blah, blah. But see what he pivots to after being laid these kind of charges of what Texas DPS is doing at the border.
The Houston Chronicle reported that the Texas DPS officers on the border have been ordered to push small children and nursing babies on the Rio Grande back into the river and told not to give water to asylum seekers. Is this true? And what is your reaction to an email that the Chronicle reported from a trooper calling this inhumane and that these policies need to change?
Jack, to be candid with you, I have seen the article, but I'm not aware of the email. It's not been brought to my attention personally or in my position as Lieutenant Governor of the state. But of course, we'll look into that. And you know, it's an email, as I understand, from someone on the border to someone at DPS, and we'll just have to look into it.
Is it concerning to you?
Of course, it would be concerning to me. At the same time, Jack, I will tell you that the reason we put up concertina wire and the reason we're putting the buoys in the river is to stop people from coming. You know, at the last year of Trump, we had the border under control. About 400,000 people or so were apprehended on the border. About 2/3 of those in Texas, because the border is 1,900 miles from San Diego to Brownsville. We're about 1,250 miles of that part. And then in the first year of Biden, it's been 2 million apprehended, or near 2 million every year, plus the gotaways, hundreds of thousands, plus, Jack, the ones we never see who cross the border. So we cannot absorb this influx of people coming here illegally into our state and into our country. We used to spend, every time I would write the budget in the past, up until Biden came into office, we spent about 800 million on the budget. We do a two-year budget, 400 million a year. And this past budget is 4 billion of our Texas taxpayer money. Anyone who drowns in the river, anyone who is thrown into sex slavery, any criminal that crosses the border, which they do, and all those things I just described happen every day. It's Joe Biden's fault. He said, keep coming, just keep coming. So this all goes back to him. We're just trying to protect our state, protect our country the best of our ability when the federal government's not doing the job. But of course, we want to do everything we do in the most humane way that we possibly can.
And do everything do everything. What did he say? So do everything we can do in the most humane way possible. I mean, I'm sorry. These even before these revelations came out, the stories we were getting of deaths at the border were unacceptable. To be facing something like that, and to basically, say, "Oh, yeah, we'll look into it," but also we're doing a really good job here, is like Gestapo level kind of stuff. This is, it's not even like the kind of traditional, like, oh, we're going to feign pain and, and compassion on these things. This is Biden's fault. And also we're doing a really good job by putting barbed wire on the Rio Grande.
Yeah,
And
and any dead bodies are good propaganda for the message that we're trying to send, which is don't come.
And, this is affecting people in all sorts of, ways. And the first and foremost is the people crossing the border and dying this way. I've talked about how Texas National Guardsmen have died and drowned in the Rio Grande because they haven't been doing enough to adequately protect them, right? People who were there working a job for the Texas state government. But even ranchers on the border now are fighting with the state government because the state government is now going across their land and covering it in barbed wire. And the Texas state government, this is from Ben Warmond, just came out a couple hours ago. He's the reporter at the Houston Chronicle who first broke this entire story. Is talking about there's a pecan farmer in Eagle Pass where a lot of these stories are taking place, where a pregnant woman was caught in state deployed razor wire. Said officials working for Governor Greg Abbott's border security initiative are refusing to take it down despite his repeated requests. And what they're being told is that they have complete authority because of the disaster declaration to cover up your personal and private property, right? I'm not typically going to cry too much about property rights on this show, but in this example, right, the argument from them is always all of these ranchers are struggling so much with this migrant influx. And now literally those same people, this constituency that they're saying we're doing all this for is saying, hey, we don't want there to be barbed wire all around our community, all around our land, because it's a massive impediment. It's something I could very easily get caught up in, or my animals get caught up in, or these people get caught up in. We don't want it. And they're being told, no, we're going to do this because it plays really well on television for Bubba's in Dallas, for people in Tennessee when Abbott decides he wants to run for president, right? So that we can make this kind of political statement at the cost of human lives, at your personal safety, and in your name. At the end of the day, I mean, like the politics is you can never accept defeat. This doesn't represent Texas. It doesn't represent Texans. People are mad about this. People don't want this kind of thing to be done. The most direct, the fastest way to deal with this crisis is for the federal government to get involved and say, no, we are not going to allow a state governor to put up weapons of war on our southern border. Full stop. That's it. You do not have the authority. We do not recognize your authority to do that. And we're going to pull those up right now. That is the quickest solution. The longer solution, the one that we more likely might have to pursue, is to support aid organizations on the border that are out there helping migrants, making sure that, like, when these DPS psychos are saying we're not going to give people water in 105-degree heat, that we're there giving people water, giving them shelter, giving them information, and help and coordinating getting them to their destinations. But most importantly, it goes back to what we're talking about across the board, is that we need a different kind of politics in this state and in this country that puts human rights, that puts working people first, because the current regime is not working for any of us, and it is only leading to more and more and more barbarism.
Yeah, and I mean, this water stuff goes back a while. Like, I remember Vice documentaries. I don't know if it was in Obama's era or if it was early Trump, but like border
Mhm.
guys going around and seeking out stashed water canteens and
And
dumping them out.
dumping them.
The other thing this has, and you mentioned Gestapo and Nazis, and I will draw another parallel, which is that this is being used to mask a failure of capitalists. JD Vance was going on about the impact of all the migration on low income like housing and things like that. And what that is doing is blaming some of the most marginalized, oppressed people that we have in the world right now for a problem by your local real estate industry.
Mhm.
That's exactly what's happening. Here's this new uh, uh, research by the Joint Center for Housing Studies from Harvard University, and I will say Harvard because it's good info. But you look at, like, you can go by here and select a state, but the general rule is that the rentals for a high income have gone up compared to, this is 2011 versus 2021, and for low income have gone down. I mean, this is, and you just pick a random state. Let's pick California, of course. See that everywhere. High, you see Colorado. Like, it's the
Mhm,
story. There's
mhm,
way more like 600, 800, way more 800, 1,000, and now the only ones that are experiencing growth are high, like expensive rent. So
mhm.
like that's where this is coming from. This is being used. These people are being scapegoated like Jews were. Like, I'm like, that's exactly where we're at here.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. What they're doing is there are problems that people are experiencing in this country because of capitalism, low wages, really expensive rents, high food costs, etc. Yeah, and instead of blaming the capitalist, the guy who's actually making money off of this, yeah, let's blame these people who are trying to cross over a river in 100-degree weather,
Yep.
with everything that they own on their backs, literally pregnant at times, carrying children with them. I mean, it is truly some of the most dehumanizing, but also a very tactical decision because, yeah, Dan Patrick, Greg Abbott, JD Vance, Trump, a lot of them don't want to talk about bosses. Frankly, neither
Nope.
do Joe Biden or the vast majority of the Democratic Party either.
Nope. And
So
that's
these
partially
things.
why we're in this position where we can't move anywhere but backwards on it.
So instead of having like a reasonable border policy, you get to scapegoat it, and not just scapegoat it. At this point, like, it's almost quaint to talk about the scapegoating, when we're talking about the human life and the human cost of this kind of thing.
Right.
It's gone beyond scapegoat,
Sacrificed.
sacrifice.
Yeah.
So I mean, this touches on a lot of different things, and we'll certainly continue to cover it. But remember, these things cascade, from the early reports of how Abbott is sort of consolidating power to be able to do things like this, to now it's a brutal realization, on the border. And don't let these things move on. Like, don't let this news cycle move on. There needs to be sustained pressure on the Biden administration to get involved, because they'd be very happy, for this to be a news cycle, that is, basically politically helpful for them, right? Oh,
Right.
Republicans are bad, right?
Yeah.
And they are. Republicans are bad, right? But if they are as bad as you say, which they are, what are you going to do about it beyond
Yeah.
trying to fundraise off of it? And we can't
Exactly.
accept that kind of shit anymore.